For more on all of that, we're joined by retired Major Glenn Ignacio. He is a national security expert and former U.S. Air Force Special Ops Commander. He joins us from Hartford, Connecticut. Thank you for making time for us.
Great to be with you. Thank you very much.
Okay, so first of all, I wanted to just get your take on those videos that have been distributed by the IDF depicting what was found in the hospital. What did you take away from the videos, the distribution, and what was uncovered?
Yeah, from the information that I saw and also the materials that were found, you're finding this in MRI buildings and other areas within a hospital that, shouldn't store information or store equipment like that. So the interesting part is we hear the reports from the UN and so forth. And, I'm not a lawyer, but if you look even on the International Red Cross's webpage, it unfortunately says that if a hospital or a protected area has any kind of direct or indirect impact on, say, an adversary, Israel, then it will lose its status. Again, I'm not a lawyer, and I think that's one of the ones that need to look at it. But that's one of the things that's interesting that may preclude that the hospital has lost its particular protection. So that's one of the things we really need to look at.
Now, the Human Rights Watch came out today suggesting that, in fact, what was uncovered doesn't mean that it should be revoked as its status of being protected under international law. Is that something that you perhaps feel like it should be looked at closer?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one of the things is that when that protection is say lost, Israel could have actually attacked, with an airstrike, and thankfully they didn't. And it's a hospital, and it shouldn't be. I agree. My mind is to give it to you neutrally. I think the idea that the Israel and the IDF went in on foot, going through the hospital methodically, is the best way to prosecute this and get rid of Hamas if they're still in that particular facility. And we've seen supplies come in. So the best thing I think Israel and the IDF could do is possibly secure these hospitals if, all of this has been backed and supported from Hamas's human shields, for them to actually go through these hospitals, protect them, and get them up and running for the individuals. That would eliminate the threat and at the same time provide services to the sick and injured as it should be.
So the suggestion here is perhaps the Israeli military take control over these particular hospitals, is what you're suggesting here, in order to make sure that they can function for the intended purpose and not as necessarily a base for Hamas, which is the speculation here from Israeli Defense Forces. I'm wondering what impact that would have going forward if those actions are taken.
Yeah, my premise would be to actually clear the hospitals of any type of Hamas threat, but leave the hospitals managed by the medical personnel that should be managing the hospital. They've seen tunnels, and this has been, over the years, these being underneath the hospitals because it's a known protected site. Hamas has done this, numerous times. So if the IDF was able to screen through the hospitals, clear that threat, maybe even close off tunnels that exist, and provide that type of sanitization of the Hamas militants to be able to let the hospital manage and operate accordingly, that would take away the whole question of, is it being protected from Hamas or is it being protected from the IDF? I think that clarifying and cleaning these hospitals to make sure there's no militants and operate like a hospital like it should might be a tactic to eliminate the he said, she said between the Hamas and the IDF.
Now, in terms of the raids that were carried out at the hospital also, I'm wondering what your estimation is in terms of finding out where the hostages are as this being part of that operation and strategy.
Yes, definitely. I believe that the hostages are being held. Some are in tunnels. I believe others are distributed in possible other facilities or even housing across Gaza. They're definitely not going to keep it in one place because, you get to one and you have everything, and Hamas is not going to play that game. I believe that is probably one of the important things. The other thing that this is brought up is the Al-Shifa and the attention to Al-Shifa hospital has been pretty significant over, the prior days before this operation even happened. That gave Hamas really early warning. And if I was sitting in an adversary spot, I would have completely evacuated from the hospital as early as possible because it's been announced that this is going to be an operation coming forward.
Now, let's also talk about one of the developments we saw, I believe, overnight, because Israeli Air Forces dropped leaflets suggesting to those who are in the south that they should also try and seek protection. And this is, of course, as we know, the casualties have reached more than 10,000 when it comes from the numbers that have been released from the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry as well. So in terms of the expansion then of the potential ground offensive, what do you make of this next step?
Yeah, that is definitely advertising what the next move is. I mean, for eliminating Hamas, you have northern Gaza, Gaza City itself, and then the southern area where originally the evacuation was to go south of what they call the Wadi Gaza. And so that was south of the actual city of Gaza. So if you have a map, you can see that. So the idea of dropping these leaflets is to give as much warning to any of the civilians to move south. Now, that's what the IDF is doing. We have reports of Hamas stopping people from leaving. So, it's hard to verify all this stuff, without a third party independently being there. But this is definitely advertising from the IDF that this is the next phase of operation. And honestly, they're really going to have to do that if their intent is to eliminate the infrastructure or the military capability of Hamas to be able to launch anything against Israel and the IDF. So this is definitely the escalation and the next step or movement of the IDF within Gaza.
Now, you mentioned a third party kind of going in because, of course, we're in that situation where the verification of the information, of the images, etc., is paramount, but also incredibly complicated and challenging. So I'm wondering what you make of all the questions that have emerged about those videos that were distributed by the IDF in terms of the storage of certain weapons, different arsenal within areas of the hospital, particularly some questions about it being in an area where there was an MRI and whether or not that would be even feasible. I'm wondering, I'm sure you're tracking all of that. So how complicated is this then as we continue to move forward and try to monitor what's happening?
Yeah, and rightfully so. A third party independent, if that's even possible, would be something that would either validate or invalidate what the IDF saying, and also validate and invalidate what Hamas is saying. Really, again, the true story. In this operation, in any military operation, you have the kinetic war. That is weapons on target, and you have the information warfare. And the information warfare is definitely, Israel is losing that. And the reason for it is it doesn't matter how justified the IDF is or how correct it is. With these numbers and seeing the carnage of what's happening in Gaza, some of these graphic images can't be taken away. And that's the initial impression people have around the world. Whereas that attack that happened on the 7th, as gruesome and horrific it is, it's being forgotten because you're seeing the daily activities and events happening within Gaza. So that whole impact is what's definitely happening around the world. That's why we see the protests. We're seeing much more nation states, go against Israel as far as their actions. And the hard part is really to validate that. Like, for example, 10,000 killed. True. But what happens if they're 10,000 Hamas or they're 10,000 civilians? It's two different areas that could sway opinion. And that's what I mean is Israel's lost sort of the information warfare. And if we had that sanity inside of Gaza, we could understand what is truly happening and really have a neutral perspective. And I think that's lost. And I think Israel is way behind and has probably lost the information warfare game.
A lot of important factors to consider. Thank you so much for your time today.
Absolutely. Thank you. And hope the best forward for everybody in this situation.
Thank you. That is national security expert, retired Major Glenn Ignazio. Thank you.